the path to success is doing the same one or two things over and over again.
Boast.AI bootstrapped to 8 figures with almost 30 employees, built on no code.
So we use from Christianity and Christ to CrossFit. They went through the exact same 4 stages. Dropbox, all these big names.
That's your first conference.
That's the first bro. Like they all like.
In the age of AI, having a community around your product is a great competitive advantage. Today, I have with me the author of this best-selling book. He's the co-founder of Boast.AI, co-founder of Traction, one of the biggest tech community in the world. How's it going, man?
Great. Thanks for having me. And what a coincidence. We've met before. I'm in Dubai and you hit me up and excited to be here, talk about community, the book, talk about all things startups.
By the way, on the book, so already put this post on the community. We're going to give away 10 copies of the book. Make sure to say at the end, I'm going to include a link how can enter the competition. This is a great book about how can start the community. So stay tuned for that.
My parents are from India. Okay, and they weren't very educated. My dad was a farmer. My mom grew up in the slums of Mumbai. And at that time, if you weren't educated and you were in India, you had two options, right? Back then in the 80s. You either try to make it work in India or you go to the Middle East because the currency converts a lot higher. They couldn't afford to go to like Europe or the US or whatever. So my dad came to Kuwait and he was working. Started as a dishwasher and he self-taught himself to cook and he became a very renowned executive chef. Nonetheless, growing up in Kuwait, that's the life, right? It was a very conservative country. Never felt like I had anything less. Like life was good. You go out, you play. That was a time there were no phones, there was no internet. Everything was very outdoorsy and the things you do. You play soccer, you wrestle in the sand, you do all kinds of fun stuff. And one morning, my mom wakes me up and she says, hey, I don't think you can go back to school for September. Kuwait's been hit by a war. Now, my first reaction was that of excitement. I'm like, yes, you're never going to find out I failed 5th grade. So what happened was I have this really bad habit of trying to study last minute for everything. And that's my philosophy in life. I just take in information when I can use it because I retain it better. So I would study last minute for every exam. Even to this date, I only take in information as I can apply it. And it's served me really well. What happened was I studied for a math exam and I show up and it's geography. I'm like, bro, this is the one time if I had studied in advance and read my books, I wouldn't be in a situation. So I know I'm going to fail. Imagine like, in 5th grade, you're trying to cheat here and there. I'm like, this is bad. So when she wakes me up and says, we can't go to school anymore, I'm like, wow, you're never going to find out I failed for 5th grade. But, as that started to become more real, and I saw worry on my mom and dad's face. I'm like, this is not good. For me, it's fun and games, but for them, this is not good. There's something serious happening. But this was the time when there was no internet, there was no phone, there was no websites. It was all about positive energy, man. We went down the building, and you know how the Middle East, Kuwait, Dubai at the time is more buildings, less villas, right? Less individual homes. So we go down the building, and I see worry on a bunch of people's faces, all adults. But immediately they come together to create solutions. Somebody is like, I'll guard the building from this time to that time, right? From like 6 p.m. to like 6 a.m. Can somebody come with me and stay with me? Somebody else is like, hey, if you don't have food, I have extra food, so I'll help you guys. Somebody else is like, hey, my family is traveling. They went for the summer and they're not back. So I have extra room in the house. If you have displaced family members, we'll give them shelter. Immediately, they started coming together to form solutions. And that is the basis of community, right? I have a problem. I also have a problem. Let's get together and solve it. Let's come together to help each other. That is community. What's interesting is over the days and the weeks that passed, every building became a sub-community. You know how in the Middle East, the buildings are right next to each other. So we'd go and talk and see what they're saying, try to learn best practices. That is community. They're like, oh, we're doing things this way. We're doing that way. Oh, we know somebody in the embassy. So every building became a sub-community and communicated with the next building, the next building, the next building. Word of mouth spread to embassies, to governments. It became the largest grassroots evacuation movements. And in a couple months, we went from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan and then back to different countries. Basically, this community, grassroots community, help people evacuate to safety when security had failed, when you weren't sure you were going to live or die. And I think, that was probably the most valuable experience in my life because I learned a number of things. When we were going on this refugee bus from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan, nobody ever made me feel like they were miserable. Even growing up, my parents weren't well off. They never made me feel like we had anything less. So as we're going there, right, from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan on this highway of death, but when I look around the bus on the faces of the adults, they're singing, man. They're playing the guitar. They're laughing. And I'm like, what is going on here? And as I reflect back, it's become my sort of rule number one in life. You know how we go around and tell each other, it's the destination. Focus on the goal, the destination. Then others say, it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I say it's neither. It's neither the destination nor the journey. It's the companions that matter the most. You could be on a shitty journey on the way to hell, but great companions will make it memorable. Who you're with, who you surround yourself with, is paramount in your life. If you hang around with 5 entrepreneurs, guaranteed you'll be the 6th entrepreneur. If you may be the smartest person in the world, but if you hang around with drug addicts and scumbags, they're going to bring you down. I'm telling you this because that's been my experience in life. I only ever hung out with entrepreneurs, and it was inevitable one day I'd start a company. When I wanted to change my lifestyle from being this overweight, overworked person in America, and I moved to Dubai, I only met friends with fit people, and it changed my life. And so I truly, truly believe curate your companions wisely. Your well-being depends on it. Imagine you have a nagging wife, and you work hard, or a nagging husband, right? You don't appreciate each other. No matter how good you have it or how much money you have, eventually it's going to impact your mental health. Wife's like, this guy is doesn't understand, always nagging, saying something stupid. And the husband's like, he doesn't understand how hard I work outside. I can never do anything right. And it impacts your well-being, right? Who you're with makes all the difference in the world. And you got to look at this trajectory of who you spend time with. As you're a kid, right, it's with your parents. And you can't control that. Parents are given to you by God. But as you grow, you start spending more and more time with your friends. So you got to curate that circle very wisely. Then you start spending time with your work colleagues. And as you're into your mid-late 20s to 30s, and then eventually into your 40s, you spend more time at work than you spend at home. So I don't understand a lot of people, they stay in this job frustrated. They hate their colleagues, they hate their boss, and they go through this misery. Honestly, if it's impacting your mental health, do yourself a favor and leave, because it's like they say in the plane, right? Put your oxygen mask first. If you can't take care of yourself, you won't be good for your family or your business. But a lot of people go through this burnout. They also are not very deliberate in whom they make a life partner. But think about it. As you grow, your kids will come, and then you'll spend a lot of time with them in the early years. But as they turn into teenagers, they'll be gone. All your time, your high school friends will also go to different places. So as you're into your 30s, 40s, you're spending time with 2 groups of people, or rather two people. One is your partner, your spouse. 2 is your colleagues. Pick very, very wisely, because the friends you make in high school, short-lived. The partner you pick, the workplace you join, huge impact. And so that's why I said the companions matter the most. And I wanted to give a few examples so it sank in on the value of the community and the people you surround yourself with.
No, absolutely. But damn, that looked like a tough childhood. So
it wasn't tough, man.
Really?
You know what's really interesting is a lot of people say tough. I had food on the table.
Thank God.
I had loving parents who cared for me. I was never made to feel we had anything less. There was never a meal missed. And I went to school. School fees were paid. I had clothes. I had shoes. Yeah, sure, we didn't have a car. at home. We'd take the bus or taxi or walk. I would walk to school a lot. But other than that, I had everything and I never felt less. A hard childhood is you don't have parents, you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, you don't know if you can go to school or not. That is a hard childhood. What some of the people in the world are going through is hardship. Um, Everything comes and goes, right? I think we tie a lot of our needs and identity to things, like a house, like a car, like luxuries, like things. But actually, what you need are basic necessities: is a home, loving parents. If you have a home and you have loving parents and food to eat and education, man, how can you ever say that it was hard?
Oh, man, speaking of school, I heard the story. I don't know how accurate it is. So you're an engineer, but technically you haven't graduated high school.
Correct.
How
Correct.
how did you do that?
So that's very interesting and hopefully a learning, right? I try to present every sort of negative story with a positive learning. I hated school, man. This is it. I still, like, me and my wife are at loggerheads. My wife's a Stanford grad. My wife teaches medicine at Stanford. Right?
Wow.
I'm somebody who didn't finish high school, finagled myself into engineering. So what happened was I bunked all my board exams. I went to a British school in Kuwait. I'm like, we're immigrating to Canada. They're never gonna find out. I didn't even study. I called the school. I'm like, hey, you know what? If I don't come for the board exams, are you gonna inform my parents? Because before I'd skip school, they'd always like my parents know. Because somebody's like, oh, his son didn't show up to school. Right? They'd get a call. But because of the way the board exams, the finals are structured, they have adjudicators from other schools, right? Just to keep it, I guess, unbiased in most cases. So they never called my house saying I skipped exams. I mean, I found out before, so I didn't go to any. I didn't go to any exam. Now we end up in Canada. We immigrate to Canada, and I'm like, oh, here's the thing: you make these short-term decisions as a kid, and you don't realize the long-term impact. And I tell my parents, I'm like, listen, I think I should do a year of high school in Canada, just to get assimilated to the system. They're like, why would you do that? He's like, I'm sure you failed. Where are your transcripts anyway? I'm like, oh man, this is trouble. This is trouble. Now, let me ask you this. Most kids who don't finish high school, like say if you didn't finish high school, would you apply to university?
I would love to.
But would you apply?
Oh, hell no.
Most kids wouldn't. What I did was I'm like, dude, my parents are going to kill me if they find out I missed all the high school exams. I don't have a high school diploma. And I'm like, you know what? It's coming. It's coming in the mail, right? From Kuwait to Canada. I applied to every university, man.
No way.
I literally applied to every university I could in Canada. Colleges, universities, everything. And one college reached out, a couple of them reached out saying, write these entrance tests, right? So I went for the interview, wrote the entrance test, math and English. Like American, Canadian systems, math and English is very rudimentary compared to what we learn in the British system, right? Kuwait, Dubai, is predominantly, the education system is more from the British side of things. And so I'm like, I aced that. Math, science, English is stuff I learned in 10th grade. So then they're like, hey, your scores are very good. Where are your transcripts? So I said, there's political unrest in my country, so I'm waiting for the transcript. And they said, listen, the semester is about to start. Why don't you start the semester, pay the fees, and if within a month of the semester starting we don't get your transcripts, you're going to have to unenroll. I'm like, okay, perfect. Now, luck would have it, I went through the semester and multiple semesters and graduated, and they never followed up on the transcripts.
Oh.
So the key learning here is this, man. A lot of my life has been a series of lucks. And people say, oh, you got lucky. I'm like, yes, I got lucky. Because a lot of people say, no, it's hard work. Bro, everyone works hard. There's always an element of luck. How you engineer luck is very important. Luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. The ones that get lucky are the ones that keep flipping risk, 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 risk. If you take enough risk, chances are one day you'll get lucky. If I didn't apply to like every single university across Canada, you think I'd get into, I'd have the opportunity to even do an interview? And if I didn't do that interview and write the entrance test, you think I'd even have the opportunity to start the semester? And they said, okay, you know what? We'll wait for your transcripts, and if you don't provide it, then you have to unenroll. And then they forgot. The reason why I got lucky is because I tried. A lot of people don't try, man.
I mean, you say it's luck, but there's a common theme throughout your journey that you apply 100 times, maybe one or two work. But how old were you? How did you deal with the rejection of hundreds of universities?
Here's the thing. You got to always know the downside and always curb your expectations. So my downside is what here in this situation? I didn't finish high school. So chances of me getting into any university is zero. So even point one is better, right? Something is better than nothing. A lot of the times what happens is we set our expectations too high. The expectation is so high and the amount of effort we're willing to put in is so low. And so then we get disappointed, right? Like even with working out, people are like, oh man, I want a six pack in 3 months. That doesn't happen. It genuinely doesn't happen. Keep showing up maybe 1 year, 2 years, and then you'll make some progress. But what happens is you have this expectation that's so high and you put in such low effort, then you set yourself for disappointment. So my philosophy is always have little to no expectations because you know where you're coming from. You know that you didn't finish high school, you don't have a diploma. Apply everywhere. If you get in, it's luck. If not, you tried.
This happened so many times in your careers when I can touch upon them. But do you remember the early work that you had in your careers? What were your early jobs?
You know what's really interesting is I never wanted to do the engineering job. Okay, so when I applied to university, I asked my mother, what should I apply for? I actually wanted to be a chef in Switzerland, but I knew I wasn't going to get in. I didn't finish high school, right? And my mom's like, listen, your dad is an executive chef, and I never saw him. You never saw him. I tolerated this, but maybe whoever you marry might not. So don't become a chef. She said, but pick a profession. I said, oh, man, Mom, I'll apply to business. And she's like, business is not something you learn in school. Business is something you have to do. So go to school to pick a trade, whether it's an engineer or a doctor. You know, a lot of parents are very forceful with their kids. No, you have to be an engineer or a doctor. My mom would always, me and my mom are very good friends. So she would always explain to me in a very logical way. So she told me, she didn't say, no, you have to apply to engineering. She said, listen, business is not something you would learn in school. You'd learn the principles of it. But your teachers there are not businessmen or businesswomen, right? So the only way to learn business is actually to do the business. So what would you learn in school then? Why don't you pick up a skill? Learn a skill. Engineering is a skill. Then you can turn that skill into a business, right? Business itself is not a skill that you learn by reading books. You'll have to do it to learn it. But engineering is a skill that you'll have to learn by going to school. So I'm like, okay, made sense. If she forced me saying, no, you must do engineering, it would be probably a different story. So I went and studied engineering, finished engineering, but I knew through the engineering, I never wanted to do this job.
Oh,
I'm like, man, I can't sit behind a desk and write code, right? It's not something I can do. It's not something I want to do. So I finished engineering and I started asking people, hey, listen, my mind was always like business. If I wanted to be a business person like you, what's the best skill I could learn? And more people I talked to, I would hear this repeatedly. You got to learn to sell. You got to learn to communicate, to convince. Everything you do in business is selling. First, you got to convince your family that I'm not going to bring money. Then you're going to have to convince customers to buy products that don't exist and pay for half-baked, non-working products. You have to convince people to work on low pay and just equity. You got to eventually convince investors maybe. You got to convince media. As you scale, you got to convince people to leave their high-paying jobs to come work for you. What is it all? It's communication, but in the real sense, it's communicating to convince. It's selling. So you got to learn the skill. So that went in my head very deeply. And I said, you know what? I'm going to apply to sales jobs. I'm going to only apply to sales jobs. Imagine graduating engineering. Our undergrad thesis was collision avoidance on real-time vehicles, which is like self-driving car algorithms. My co-founder who is my co-founder at Boast, who was my partner in every project in university, Alex Popa, he built it. And again, I was selling it, meaning I was pitching it, I was presenting it. And so our professor asked us to do a PhD in that, and we're like, hell no, right? That's not what we wanted to do. And nonetheless, I'm like, I can't even code. He coded it, I presented it, I wrote the paper, yada yada. So we had a great team between the two of us, but I didn't want to do this job. So I started applying to sales jobs. Now, again, luck would have it, in 2004 or 5, when you apply to sales jobs as a new grad, that too from engineering, most big companies will not hire you as a salesperson. I kept getting this question, why do you want to work in sales? You're an engineer. Like, we don't understand, why do you want to work in sales? And, your communication is awkward. I was just trying to learn how to communicate or improve my communication skills. Like, it doesn't fit. Now, luck would have it, there's one startup founder who had like a small team of 5, 6 people. He needed cold callers. And he gave me the job. He's like, listen, man, I need cold callers. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just take this job, right? You can start dialing tomorrow. And today, as I reflect back, that one experience probably formulates my thesis of how I do everything. If you want to get good at something, the only way to get good at it is to put yourself in an environment that forces you to do that something over and over and over again. Basically, high reps, high volume in a short amount of time. That's the only way to really get good at something. And so when I started there, I'm like, I practiced, I read, and the first time a decision maker hopped on the call when I was dialing, I hung up the phone. I'm like, oh man, what am I going to say? So all my practice went out the window. Right? All the theory I learned, I read books on how to call, what to say, wrote the script. They're like, hello? And I hung up. Now, the 4 or 5 cold callers around me, they started laughing. But again, they understood they've been there in the seat for a little while longer. So we helped each other. So I was in an environment full of cold callers who were encouraging each other. And the job is to make 50, 60 calls a day. Right? So high volume in a short amount of time. So over the time that I worked there, I got really good at communicating over the phone, cold calling, etc. Now, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we've been dating since our teens.
Oh, wow.
She got into medical school in New Jersey, so I knew I'm not going to be in Canada. I got to move there. So I started applying to jobs in New Jersey. I started applying to jobs in New Jersey, same thing, no big company is going to hire me. Obviously, like one, he's an engineer doing sales, but he's doing sales for a startup. Like 2004, 5, especially outside of Silicon Valley, people wouldn't view like 5, 10-person companies as startups. It's like, what is this? Like small business kind of thing. Now, luck would have it, a startup in New Jersey hired me. They had, I think, like 15 or so people. And it was more enterprise sales. I'm like, wow, this is like a great promotion. Go from like making minimum wage to making, I think, 50,000 USD at the time was great money in 2006. I get to move to New Jersey, be near my girlfriend, and it's doing enterprise sales. They had customers like Tiffany, Armani, Simon & Schuster, all of this stuff. Now, when I go there and I started the job, I realized it's not really a sales job in the sense they don't really have a product that's entirely firing on all cylinders. And so my job is not only calling customers and talking to them, but meeting with them, trying to figure out their requirements.
Product market fit.
And take those requirements to the dev team and tell the dev team what to build through wireframes and all that wireframing and stuff. When I studied software engineering in university, I learned like wireframe and requirements documentation. Fortunately, I learned that, right? Use cases and wireframes, all was a part of our software education, right? And then when we were doing the undergrad thesis, we had to write the use cases and the actors and the wireframes. So I'm like, okay, I learned this, I know this. But now going to people's site from the phone, like so nerve-wracking. All right, like, and that to big customers, Tiffany, Armani, Simon & Schuster, Tory Burch. So what I would do is I'd drive long drives and I'd listen to audiobooks on the way, right? Like, so I can practice on what to say, how to say.
Do you remember any of those
Yeah,
audiobooks?
Spin Selling, one of my favorite books.
Really?
It's great for product managers specifically. So SPIN stands for situation, problem, implication, and need payoff. See, when you're an early when you're a salesperson for an early stage company or an early stage product that doesn't have product market fit, there's nothing repeatable you're selling. There's no case studies, use cases, nothing. So what you need to understand is the customer's pain points and figure out what to build and relay that back. So you can't say, this is my features, this is my benefits. You use this framework called SPIN, which is more like consultative selling, and S stands for situation. So you ask a situational question like, have you ever been in a situation where you experienced XYZ? Then you ask a problem question. What problem did it create? Right? Few questions, and they frame the problem for you. And then you ask implication questions. What happened as a result of that? What happened? What happened? What happened? And then you ask a need payoff question, which is, in the perfect world, how do you see this working? So they've basically given they downloaded their whole problem set and what an ideal solution would be. And then you may ask them like, hey, ROI related questions, right? Like how many people this would save for you? What's the manpower you're using, or what's the labor cost? What is the tech costs? And if you use a solution like this, what would it save you? So then you can build the ROI case. So I would listen to books like that, and Spin Selling is one of my favorite books because it's a great book for product managers. So a lot of product managers just suffer from this. They go to school, they come out, and they work for a big company or mid-sized startup, and they're shoeboxed into solving specific problems within a larger product, right? Like a more established product. Now, being a scale stage or a feature PM in a larger or more established company that has established customers and established need is very different than being a 0 to 1 PM. And a lot of people that come out of school, they find it hard to be a 0 to 1 PM because you almost have to be a founder. You need to learn to sell and you need to learn to communicate. And this book, Spin Selling, was hugely, hugely valuable for me because it was a framework on how to question and how to ask questions and how to understand the customer pains and frame that into a product. Frame that into a product requirements documentation or a problem statement for your dev team, or jobs to be done, what we use, right? These are jobs they're trying to do.
Absolutely.
What are the high level jobs? What are all the steps that are required for them to complete the job? In an ideal world, how can we expedite that? How can we make it faster, better, cheaper, so they are not doing 10 steps and they're doing like 1 or 2 steps kind of thing. So you can create that whole spec or problem framework, problem framing, or jobs to be done for your product team. And I think every aspiring product manager, if you want to work for a big company and eventually grow, that's different. But if you want to work in startups, I would say go to an early stage startup. Spend 2 years there, seed stage. Work alongside the founder because you learn a few things.
Seed stage, no product market fit yet.
No product market fit yet. To me, that's the best experience. My 3 jobs were like that. And so I understood the risk appetite. And so Alex Popa, my co-founder at Boast, he had the idea to build Boast. And when he called me, I jumped at the opportunity because I'm like, you know what? I'm working for low pay, no pay for these companies that are not growing, that are venture backed. Why burn 60, 80 hours of my week working for them, and the chances of them going boom or bust are like up in the air? I may as well do it for myself and control my destiny. So the moral of the story is your companions matter the most. Because I worked for 3 founders, I understood the risk profile. I also was a plus one to a founder, right? Because I had nothing to do. I was young, I wasn't married, no family. So I was literally hanging out with the founder and doing everything it takes. So it wasn't like, oh, you're a salesperson. And what most people do is they join an early stage startup as a salesperson and they complain, oh, customer's not buying the product. There's no product market fit. I can't make my commission. People complain. I'm like, what is my aspiration? I want to be an entrepreneur someday. So then I asked the customers, like, what would it take for you to use this product? What are the jobs you're trying to get done? What are your key top 3 priorities? How are you doing them today? Is it working? Is it not working? If it's not working, what other problems it's creating? In the perfect world, how do you see this working? And I take that feedback to the dev team. So I became this sort of renaissance salesperson, which is a salesperson who works in an early stage startup that doesn't have product market fit. And this person is part salesperson, so they open the doors, and part product manager. They get the feedback and the requirements and they relay it to the product team. Then the product team builds it and they take it back to the customer, and the customer uses it and they take that usage feedback back. And to me, that is the most invaluable experience if you ever want to become a founder someday. Because to be a scale stage PM, there's lots of frameworks and there's lots of education and training and learning, right? Because it's established, like, Google's framework and Salesforce's framework and Atlassian's framework. To be an early stage PM, there's no frameworks, right? Everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face. Mike Tyson says that, right? Like, that's his quote. Being an early stage PM, especially in a pre-product market fit company, is getting punched in the face every day. And so the two skills you learn there is talking to customers. A lot of PMs, as they scale, they talk to customers in a very mechanical way, the scale stage PMs. When you work in an early stage startup, your communication skill improves because you're now like, you can't speak mechanically to the customer because you have nothing. You have nothing that's proven. So you cannot form you cannot stick to a very prescriptive conversational style. You have to be very fluid because you have to pivot on the fly. They say something else, then you got to change. When you're in a scale stage, it's very prescriptive. There's a plan, there are benchmarks, there are specific goals, there are frameworks. Early stage, the market may change tomorrow. Your product may change day after tomorrow. And even like the GTM or how you talk to customers, you have to just pivot on the fly. So to me, honestly, if anyone wants to be a tech entrepreneur, go and work for an early stage founder and learn to do everything there.
Thank you for making the difference between a scale PM and a early stage PM. In our community, we have few founders who do not have product management skills. And you're a founder and you had to learn product management and sales. Any advice what they need to learn?
So product management in the early stages is not about your emotion. In general, product management should never be about emotion. Product management, selling in the early stages. So let me give you the distinction. Selling in the early stages is about trying to understand the customer and figuring out what to build. And product management in the early stage is also the same thing. It's a very good combination. So a great experience for people is if they worked as consultants or selling a service, right? If you sell a service, the benefit of it is customers want outcomes in general. They don't want products. By selling them a service, you're expediting the path to the outcome for them. And you learn to be very consultative and you learn to understand their pain points and the outcomes they're looking for without relying on an actual product as a crutch. What happens is as you scale, you have a product. So everything is like, oh, this feature, that button, right? But in the early stages, almost like being a consultant or coming from a consulting sales background is more beneficial because you're trying to sell an outcome. And I think with ChatGPT and generative AI, as we look into the future, customers are more and more going to say that, like, why do I need your marketing automation? Can't you just send me more leads? Right? Or why do I need this finance tool with all this bells and whistles? Can you just not send me my reports done for me? People are going to want more outcomes, right? And so when you come from that consulting background or services sales background, it's very easy for you to sell in the early stages because you're used to selling outcomes, not using a physical product as a crutch. So I think that's very, very important to learn that ability to sell. Now, product management in the early stages, prioritization. And I think even till today, as you scale, is prioritization. Customers will tell you all kinds of things. And this is where product managers, founders, they falter. They're like, customer wants this, let's put this. This customer wants this other feature, let's put that. And then what you have is a Pandora's box that no one can use, right? What you want to do is distill the learnings across your customer interviews, talking to 50, 100 customers, into key specific problem sets that you can solve with the most minimal feature set. One feature, the better, right? And so you distill your learnings and you try to find themes across interviews, not like features. When you listen to problems and think of features, you're solutioning. Just be in the problem space, understand the problem, and then try to find a common feature set that will solve it. And if you're seeing sort of different problems, then you got to prioritize which problem to solve. And the way I look at which problem to tackle first is the learnings from across your customer interviews. So one is how many people it's going to reach, right? There's this famous now framework called Rice Score, which I use that across everything, even go to market. So I'll give you an example of how to use it in different places. So how many people it's going to reach? What is the impact for the customer in your business? What is your confidence in getting that done? And what is the effort involved? If something is low reach, why would you do it? Like, let's say you talk to 100 people and 60 people need something, and it's going to be a high impact for their business. And as a result, if it's high impact for them, you'll get paid the most. Versus something that 20, 30 people need, and it's not a must have, it's a nice to have, right? You go through this must have, need to have, nice to have. In COVID, a lot of need to have and nice to haves got funded at high valuation. Now what's happening is a lot of those companies are failing. I myself am an angel investor in a number of companies. Many of them have failed because they need to have, nice to have. I invested in friends. But if you see what products stick in the long term are must have, mission critical products. So you got to figure out, like, yes, how many people it's going to reach? What is the impact? Meaning, is it mission critical to their business? What is my confidence that I can solve it? And what is the effort involved? And that's how you prioritize. Now, let's say you're not even at the product stage. You're an idea stage, right? And what I'll do is dive into the stages of a company. So if you have an idea, what is the first stage? I need to validate. So validation. Next stage is product market fit. Next stage after that is go-to-market fit or product channel fit. And the last one is scale. These are the 4 stages of any company. Now, let's say you're at the idea stage and you need to validate. How do you validate? To have a validated idea, you should have nailed the market, right? You have an ideal customer profile that has demonstrated a need for the product. And ideally, they pay you on a pilot or whatever to try it out. So how do you pick the right market then? When I was doing Boast, and you're in the thick of things, you're throwing spaghetti on the wall and saying, hopefully it works.
Just before we start on that, I would love to go through the stages through Boast. Can you tell me exactly what is Boast and what is the problem that you guys trying to solve?
Definitely. So globally, hundreds of billions of dollars are provided by governments to fund businesses for research and development, right? Innovation and R&D. In the US and Canada, the governments give over 10 billion. Unfortunately, that process is cumbersome. It's prone to frustrating audits, and getting the money takes a long time. So Boast is a fintech platform that integrates with a company's technical and financial systems and gets them money for the R&D and innovation. Ultimately, innovation drives the world, right? Every dollar spent in innovation returns 20 to the economy. Vaccines, robots, clean drinking water is a function of innovation, and Boast gets companies money for innovation. That's what we do. We're an innovation funding platform.
So the startup that you founded is a regulated fintech.
Yes.
One of the hardest thing to enter.
Yeah, working in a regulated industry, leveraging AI, and disbursing money to people. That's what we do. Now, in the early days, it's funny, when we started, we didn't build a product. I think till $1 million, we didn't have a piece of software.
Can you tell me more about that? Because this is very exciting.
And so I'll walk through these stages in that framework, right? Ideation, right? So you have an idea, you validate it. So validation, product market fit, product channel fit, and scale. So when Alex said, we have this idea for Boast, getting companies money for R&D, we didn't have money. We didn't want to raise money, right? And what's the best way to fund this thing? Customer money, bootstrap, right? And step one is what? Validation. Reach out to people and see if they'll buy it. You can do this work manually, right? And so on day one, I knew to cold call. So I picked up the phone, cold called, cold emailed oil and gas, construction, manufacturing, all the stable companies. Be like, hey, there's all this money from the government. You're doing innovation and R&D, product development. Basically, if you're developing new products, improving existing products, we can get you a lot of money from the government. They're like, who are you guys? Looks like two young guys who recently created their LinkedIn page. Sounds a little hokey. Like, why would I give you my IP and innovation data, right? All kinds of red flags. So it's very hard getting through established industries like construction, oil and gas, manufacturing. So we started going to their events and seeing if we can meet them in person and it'll be easier. But man, they look like the Cigars Club, right? Old boys Cigars Club. And we look like two young guys who threw on a suit jacket on top of a hoodie and showed up. So dejected, we said, man, what do? We started going to all the startup events. And in going to the startup events, we felt we found our tribe.
But there's no market, there's no money in startups.
But that's the long-term play, and I'll walk through that framework.
Okay.
Startups are still spending money to develop everything. See, when you're an established company, maybe 20% of what you do is R&D. When you're a startup, 100% of what you do in R&D, right? So if they're spending money on employees to build products, almost all of that is R&D, and we can get them that money. So from that perspective, for our industry, specific to us, there was great money in startups. And everyone was laughing at us, all the big players like the big four accounting firms and stuff who offered the service manually. They're like, man, startups are going to go bankrupt and nobody's going to pay you. You guys will be out of business very quickly. And for us, it's like, man, you don't want to serve them. Your customers don't want to work with new guys like us. So we have to serve our own. So hanging out with these startup founders, we started going to startup events and we felt we found our tribe. They were starting out, we were starting out, we had similar problem sets. We started hanging out with them, partying with them, doing hackathons together, and we found our tribe.
That's in Canada.
That's in Canada. So as I look back now, for anyone starting out, if you have an idea, you need to validate it. Validation means you have an ideal customer profile that has an established problem that they're willing to pay you to solve. You need all three. So how do you use the RICE score for this? Small but growing market size. So market size. So a small but growing niche. So we didn't go after all businesses. We went after startups. We didn't go after all startups. We went after tech startups. We didn't go after all tech startups. We went after tech startups in a specific city in Canada, in Calgary, because Alex was living there. Although I was in San Francisco, I moved in with him for a year. And so we started targeting startups in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who were technology based and just seed early stage startups. So, niche down, super niche down. That's why everyone was saying, oh, you guys are going to go nowhere. Fast forward 10 years, that's exploded, right? So you got to pick a trend and skate to where it's going. So our belief was innovation rules the world. And the more time you spend with startups, the chances of that industry, chance of you doing well is going to be high because although startups have a high failure rate, all innovation comes from there. And if they're spending money on innovation, even if they fail 2 years down the road, we can still get them funding from the government. And that bet played off. It was a very contrarian view going after startups when everyone is working with established businesses. Now, fast forward 14 years, everyone has startup programs, right? Oh, I want to work with startup. I want to work with startup. Where were you when nobody wanted to serve them? We were there. And so we started building community for that startup, for startups in Calgary. And then over time, it expanded to Vancouver and Toronto and San Francisco, and it became a massive community. But again, so these are the four things you need. small but growing market, ease of access. It doesn't matter if it's a big market or a small but growing market. If you can't access it, you'll not have a business. And propensity to pay, right?
Can you help me understand how did you validate it? I mean, because I'm imagining there's a lot of business processes in place and requirement gathering is not easy. What do you do? Did you pay $1 million to build your first prototype?
No, none of that,
How do
right?
you
So,
do?
so I'll go through this framework first. So first
Yeah,
was like, okay, our business idea is helping companies get money from the government. Okay, we need to validate this, that there is a need. So if we have an ideal customer profile with an established problem that is willing to pay us, it's validation. It's not product market fit, it's validation. And so when you look back, you need four things to figure out the market. One is small but growing niche. If it's small and stays small forever, you'll never build a big business. It has to be small so you can get it. You can start with their need and then explode over time. Propensity to pay, meaning they should be able to pay you. Ease of access, meaning you should be easily able to have conversations with them, not like you make 100 calls and like nobody answers the phone. And the fourth one, I think this is the most important thing. Do you have a passion for this market? If you hate your customers, you'll never build a big business. Every company eventually, right, for the founders becomes all about customer conversations, especially as you scale. What is a founder doing? Spending time with customers, going to events. If you hate your customers, you'll never be able to sustain. And for me, think about it. We built Boast for that customer base. We built a community called Traction for that customer base. I wrote a book for that customer base. If I hated that audience, you think I'd be able to do all of this? No. So those are four things you need. Now, how do you validate? It's simple, man. I truly believe in trying to sell a service and do it manually before you build a product. That's the only way to bootstrap. How else are you going to do it? You don't have money and you need to eat. So we said, you know what? Customers want an outcome. So we started reaching out to them and saying, hey, once we started going in the community and hanging out with them and getting to know them, we're like, hey, there's all this government money. Have you thought of applying for it? They're like, yeah, we have these consultants and stuff, but you guys seem like good guys. And we would tell them about the product vision, but it was all about, listen, man, I don't have that. We kept hearing, listen, I'm so busy running the startup. I don't have the time to write forms and reports and these long tech requirements docs for the government. If you can take this headache from me, it's great. I'll do business with you. And so we said, you know what? We'll just pull information from your systems and have 1-2 conversations with your CTO on what you're building. So by pulling information from your systems, we'll learn everything that you're building. And so when we go and have a conversation with your CTO or your technical person, we're very informed. And we'll prepare the reports and we'll file the forms and everything with the government. And you can pay us when the government pays you. So we made it easy. So we had like 5-6 customers within a month or two, man, right? And so for us, that was validation.
And those customers you approached during those events, conferences,
Exactly.
cold calls?
Mostly from community events.
Okay.
Because the cold calling wasn't working, like I said, so we started going to the community events. Now, one benefit of starting with a small niche is you learned everything about them. Now, let's say you want to get to know a bunch of people, right? If you try to get to know, like, let's say, I want to meet UAE residents, it's going to be very hard for you to resonate because there's all kinds of people. But what if you say, I want to get to know a bunch of Lebanese people in Dubai who are product managers? Don't you think you have a better chance of building relationships with them because you're Lebanese in Dubai and you're a product manager?
Yes.
Right? So that's why hyper niche. So when we moved away from targeting all businesses to startups in that region, it was very easy to understand their problems. And we understood two things very quickly. Startups in smaller regions, other than Silicon Valley, have a very hard time to get support. What was true 10 years ago is true even today. Even in Dubai, this is the problem, right? They're hard to get support and no media wants to cover them. So what we did was we reached out to the local newspaper and said, hey, can I write a column to cover startups? And they're like, no, it's not interesting. So we didn't take no for an answer. I went to a friend who had a regional blog, and I wrote a column for him about startups in the region. And then rather than just leaving it on his blog and waiting for the blog to generate traffic, I went to everyone in my phone book and email list and asked them to promote it. And they blew it up. They shared on Twitter and LinkedIn and everywhere. And it got so much traffic that I took that blog post and I went back to the newspaper editor. I'm like, listen, the newspaper is like a declining medium. I wrote this blog post about innovation and startups and it blew up. Imagine if I wrote something like this for you, you would get a whole new audience. And he said to me, he's like, okay, this is interesting. I'm willing to experiment with you on one blog post, a blog post. I'm like, great. That's what I wanted because it's the newspaper, right? Like, what better social proof than that? Now, here's the thing, man. Never ask for permission when you're an entrepreneur. Beg for forgiveness later. Just take the bet. I went to a founder who had raised money and was having a hard time getting coverage on TechCrunch. I said, I'll cover you. And I called that blog post Startup of the Week. Now, nice. This founder went and shared it everywhere. And of course, I shared with my list. And it went even more viral than that first blog post I wrote on a regional column, right? Regional blog. Because that connotation of Startup of the Week in the local newspaper created two things. Oh, the newspaper is starting a new series on startups. This is great. And it went viral. Now, the editor called me and I'm like, uh-oh, he's going to be pissed. And I was surprised with what he said. He's like, man, this got so much traffic. If you commit to writing it every week, I will give you a print column. Beauty, right? And these are the first steps of building a community.
It's great for SEO.
Yeah, great for SEO. One, what other medium, online medium in a country has a higher domain authority than a newspaper website? It's usually the best, university or government or newspaper, right? So huge SEO. Two, my name was on every column and Lloyd at Boast, right? So we got massive SEO. Every column had a backlink to our website. So now our obscure website in a few months, started ranking #1 for our keywords. Because I said Lloyd from Boast and I put a description of what we did and ran a backlink to the anchor texted keywords for our products. Then it gave social proof because everyone's like, these guys are not unknown anymore. Like the Boast guys are, if the newspaper trusts them to write a column, they're not going to run away with our IP information. There's credibility. The fourth thing what I did was I put a form in there saying, if you want to be featured, apply. So my list started building.
And you're collecting leads this way.
Now, here's the thing, man. Like if you look at it, you build an audience. You need an online medium to build the audience. Back then, there was no Instagram for business. There was no LinkedIn wasn't huge for business. It was more like a job hunt site. So I needed an online medium to build the audience. I knew if I started a blog, I would be competing with the Neil Patel and all these bloggers. So creating a weekly blog on the newspaper site gave me an audience. Now, how do I turn that audience into a community? I started inviting them weekly to our co-working space for meetups. That's it. You start building an audience. Now you have their emails, and even if you don't, reach out to that audience and try to bring them together to congregate with one another on a regular basis. So you turn that audience into a community.
Before we dive into community, sorry to interrupt. Can we double click just on building the prototype? Because Boast.AI was bootstrapped to 8 figures with almost 30 employees. And your first product was built on no code, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so I'm going to walk through that, through this community.
Yeah.
So as we started building this community, we understood that repeatedly over and over again, spending time with our customer base, that nobody cared about software. They only cared about the outcome.
Oh,
I want the money.
It's a hard fact.
It's a hard fact, right?
Yeah.
So think about it this way. If tomorrow, I know HubSpot's the biggest marketing automation product on the planet, right? And let's say tomorrow another product comes by, like maybe it's ChatGPT. And they say, no, you know what? You don't have to use it. You don't have to hire anyone. Every month for each salesperson, I'm going to send you 100 leads. Would you not pay for that?
Oh, hell yes.
You'd consider it because you want leads. Because what happens these days is you sign up for a product, then almost always you have to hire an operations person to manage it. And you all of a sudden now you have like 3-4 licenses and all this usage. Look at Salesforce, for example. Because I know now at peak we have like maybe 30 salespeople. The cost on sales tools for each salesperson is almost $2,000. Like you got a professional license for Salesforce and they got to log all this information and it sucks all their productivity. What if there is a tool that as the salesperson makes calls, it pulls that data automatically and updates the CRM and tells them who they should follow up with? Why do you need Salesforce then? Right? So I think as technology proliferates, particularly generative AI, people are going to say more and more that I want outcomes. I don't want software. The next big unicorns will be AI generative services. It'll be services industry that leverages generative AI to deliver outcomes. But nonetheless, that was our vision 10 years ago when generative AI didn't exist. So we knew that customers want outcomes. Like we could build software and give them, but if they have to manage the software to create their own applications and file it with the government, it takes away from running their business. Every founder wants to spend time on their business, not do grunt work. So we're like, don't spend time applying for government funding and all these grunt work. Download it to us. We'll get the information, we'll do it, and we'll apply. What happens when you do this work manually, bro, is you get to understand the workflow really well. What is product management at the end of the day? It's understanding a workflow and condensing that workflow to deliver it faster, better, right? So by doing this work manually, because we'd take their information, we'd read it, then we'd like, okay, we need to condense it. Then we need to have conversations with their CTO to clarify things. Then we need to fill forms, and then we need to follow up with the government. So we understood the workflow really well. So now we're like, what are the manual steps in that workflow? Collecting the data, reading the data, filling forms, following it with the government. So now then, if you're collecting data, you can write integrations to pull data from the payroll and accounting systems and project management systems. Then you can write code to normalize that data and analyze that data. Then you can then you write code to do workflow, which is fill out forms and write applications. And then now you can write even algorithms to do automatic check-ins with the government. But nonetheless, we did that work manually. If we didn't do it manually, we would start with product and then we'd have to sell the product. So now we already had paying customers. We knew the workflow really well. Customers were happy and sticking around because they didn't have to do no work and they were getting a check from the government and they would renew. And then we're like, man, all this manual work is getting very hard for us. What can we build very quickly? And Alex used Zapier and Zoho. You know Zoho?
No way.
So Zoho has Zoho Creator.
Yes.
So we use Zoho Creator and Zapier, and Alex built like the workflow tool from scratch. And honestly, man, that took us to a few million. Then he hired his cousin from Romania, who was a developer, and then we replatformed and we built from scratch. And that took us to 10 million with less than 30 people. At the end of the day, so we go through these stages, right, of a startup. Validation. You have an ideal customer profile that has an established pain that pays you to try it out. You have validation. Get 5 of those, you have validation. What is product market fit? For a bootstrap company, product market fit is a customer who paid you to try it out doesn't leave you. If they leave you, you can't eat. So the lagging indicator or the goal of product market fit is high retention. So then how do you figure out you're going to have high retention? Usage, right? Growing engaged users. If your customers don't use the product, you'll never have high retention. You may sign up for a product and pay for an annual plan. But if it's a crap product where you're not onboarded, you're not using it, you're not getting value from it, you'll cancel at the end of the year or even before. So that second phase is product market fit. Every stage in a startup, although there's a goal, there's a leading indicator. A lot of people, they don't look at leading indicators. And I tell people, don't wait for the goal. Figure out what the leading indicators are and follow those. So if the goal of validation is to get 5, 10 paying customers to pay you to try it out, what is the leading indicator? Do you have a hypothesis for the ideal customer profile based on the market size and ease of access and propensity to pay? Are you getting conversations with them? Are you having weekly 30, 40, 50 conversations? If you time box yourself and say, I'm going to take 3 months or 6 months to validate an idea, and my goal at the end of the validation is to have 5, 6 paying customers to try it out, pilots or whatever. But you're not making the calls week on week. You know 100% you're not going to have any paying customers. You're not going to validate it. A lot of people spend time in theory, like, oh, okay, I want to go after this ideal customer profile. Okay, I'm gonna go after finance people in large enterprises. Well, you have a hypothesis for an ideal customer profile. It's not validated. If you haven't talked to 100 finance people and established an identifiable pain, and furthermore, they're willing to pay you to try it out. So I think that is the key. Is like not only you have papered this ideal customer profile, but you're validating it by having conversations and taking a step further and saying, hey, would you be willing to do a small pilot with me for X money? The amount doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the highest. It has to be they pay you something, because when people pay you, they're invested. If it's free, then they're like, whatever, right? Especially it's an early stage. So same way with product market fit, you can't have high retention if people aren't using your product. So you need to make sure when you sign a customer, especially if they're manual and you don't have a product, you're onboarding them really well. They're getting a quick time to value. Like, I came to your product to solve a problem. As soon as I signed up, I have this aha experience. I know what I'm there for. It delivers me the value. And then it forces me to keep coming back. Now the next phase is product channel fit, or go-to-market fit. Now that you have high retention, then you can figure out one repeatable, scalable channel to acquire customers. And that could be community, that could be sales, it could be ads, whatever it is. But what you're optimizing for in product channel fit or go-to-market fit is CAC to LTV ratio, right? So your CAC payback period should be really, really low. If you're spending money on a customer, acquiring a customer, and it takes you like 5 years to pay back, it's a problem, right?
What's the ideal CAC at LTV ratio for early stage?
I think, let's talk about it from a CAC payback period. The money you spend on acquiring a customer should ideally pay back in less than 6 months if you're a bootstrap company. If you're a bootstrap company, you can't spend money on a customer and wait for it for 2-3 years to pay you back, man. You'll be out of business. You'll run out of money, right? You say, okay, I spend $100 to acquire this customer. Now this customer, by the time I earn $100 back from this customer, it'll be 2 years. Now do that across 1,000 and 10,000 customers. You'll be bankrupt if you have no funding. So it's very important to optimize for low CAC payback period, ideally, especially in this market where valuations are low and funding is tight, less than 6 months. And having that discipline actually forces you to be frugal. When you raise money, what happens is like, okay, you know what, just get some customers and we'll figure out the CAC LTV or the payback period later. That can become dangerous because it becomes like a drug. You start spending more and more and more and more money on ads or like unsustainable means. And then you realize your customer doesn't like the product or it's taking a long time to pay. Or some people say, we'll raise the prices later. It's so hard to raise prices on people, right? Especially if you're not a mission critical product. So I think that's really important, is to optimize for the CAC payback period, especially if you're a bootstrap company. And if your CAC payback period is lower than 3 months, it's great. A lot of people also make this mistake of investing in growth and go-to-market before they have product market fit. Product market fit to me is not NPS score. A lot of people say, oh, it's NPS score. But you may say, I love the product, but you may not pay or you may not renew. Product market fit to me is retention is very high. Like my NRR is like 100%, my net revenue retention. Like customers not leaving me. If I don't have product market fit, say let's say you have 20% churn and you start investing in growth, you lose your whole customer base, right?
Leaky bucket.
Leaky bucket. You're throwing money in fire. I'll tell you, I did this product called Speakeasy in 2015, and it was AI for sales. Before the call, it preps you for the meeting. During the call, it guides you on what to say. After the call, it creates a set of action items and tells you who you should follow up with. When we launched that product, we were naive, young. We launched it in the App Store. And we got 10,000 users, man. We ran some ads on the App Store. I got 10,000 users. When I started looking at the user profile of the users, I told the team, we're going to fail. if you don't change. It was butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers, man. All kinds of people, right? There was no ideal customer profile. Priests are using it to run mass service. I'm like, bro, Bessemer Ventures and Salesforce has funded this company. There's a Salesforce integration. And these people are signing up to just use the app like a calling app. It's a calling app for salespeople. And I fought tooth and nail with the team. It was an investor incubated company. So we had a professional CEO from day one. Never do that, right? And this constant argument, like, no, if you make it paid, everyone's going to go away. And what are we going to explain to investors? Your business shouldn't be about making up stuff and justifying to investors. Your business should be about delivering value to an ideal customer profile and making sure they use the product, get value from it, so they stay. And until you figure that out, you shouldn't focus on growth. And I fought tooth and nail. Finally, they started seeing this customer-based churn. And initially, it was like, spend more money on ads to fill the churn. I'm like, that's the most ridiculous thing. So you can say in board meetings that we have 10,000 users, now we grow to 12, and you're just filling the churn. And you're spending all the money. And one day, I'm like, enough, man. Look at how what we're doing. We're like churning and we're filling the churn. So let's make it paid, and let's make the mandatory step of Salesforce integration. So if people are forced to integrate Salesforce, the only people who stick around are salespeople. Fought tooth and nail, and we did that. And there's like, out of the 10,000+ people that signed up, 300 salespeople stuck around. Right? So that's your real customer base. Yeah. So as we started talking to salespeople, we made the product better for them. And we started signing enterprise deals, like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 a year. What happened by that time, though? Company ran out of money and we had to shut down. It was too late. And that's why I say this is a very prescriptive path. Validation, figure out your ideal customer, their pain point, and are they willing to pay you to try it out? Then solve for retention. And the way to solve for retention is make sure people are engaged, or growing users who are engaged. Growing users who are not engaged in your product, who are just signing up, is the empty calories of growth. It feels good like you're growing, but it doesn't do anything for your product. A real growth is users who are signing up, getting value, using it, whatever your metric is, week on week, month on month, day on day, whatever it is. Our metric at Boast is not weekly usage. Our customers sign up, they integrate their data, and it's monthly, quarterly reporting. So as long as they're getting the money and they're drawing that money, it's valuable. And after that, you figure out a repeatable channel to acquire customers, whether it's sales, ads, community, whatever it is. Once you have one kind of customer coming to you for one product through one channel, you can scale the business, right? Then you're at a point of scale. Then you're like, let me hire a team to put fuel on fire. That's it. So a lot of founders, what happens is they have an idea and they put themselves as CEO, president. You're not that. What are you when you have an idea and trying to validate the market? You're an individual contributor. You're a doer. Do not lose focus. That means you're sticking elbows, you're poking fingers, you're cold calling yourself, you're talking to customers yourself, you're writing requirements yourself. Then when you have these paying customers and you're aspiring towards product market fit, you're still not a CEO, man. You are a manager maybe, because you'll hire 1-2 people and you'll manage them. You're managing them. You have direct reporting. You're solving for retention. Don't lose eye on the prize. You're not CEO. A lot of people, what happens is they abstract from the business too soon. And I see this more outside of Silicon Valley happening, is they want to play the role that's on their business card, but not the role that their business needs. The business card versus the business needs. So they start hiring people to do that work. I have never been able to successfully hire somebody in a startup where me or my co-founders haven't actually done the work. Because if I don't know what it entails, anyone can pull the wool over me. How do I hire for a role in an early startup when I'm just hoping that this person is saying the truth? I have no experience with it. And so as a next phase, if you've talked to 100, 200 customers, signed 5 of them to pilot with you, then you can hire 1-2 salespeople. And you manage those salespeople, so you're a manager. Now, what happened is all the conversations you had with 50, 100, 200 people, It's refined your messaging. You've written it all down, right? You know how to approach them, what resonates, what doesn't. That's why you were able to hire 5 people. So you can take that messaging and give that to those salespeople as a playbook. Now you become a manager. Now, when you go towards go to market fit or product channel fit, you're still not a C suite. You've gone from being a manager to a VP because you've hired a manager to manage those people. You're still very tactically involved in the business till you find a repeatable, scalable channel to acquire customers. Your business is at risk until you don't have a repeatable go to market channel and you don't have high retention, meaning product market fit and product channel fit. So now, once you have that, then you have a VP of marketing, maybe VP of sales or senior director of sales, senior director of marketing. You have people managing this. And their expertise is you've taken it to 0 to 1, they can take it to 1 to 10. They're coin operated. Now your job as a found becomes a C-suite. And there, your job should evolve into trying new things. What do you do at scale? At scale, you're either trying to figure out a new product or a new market or a new channel. Now, a lot of people, what mistake they make is they've hired these VPs to scale the business, but rather than putting fuel on the fire where it works, they distract these VPs to say, okay, help me figure out a new product. Help me figure out a new market. They can't because they haven't figured out something new. They've taken what you have and they have leveled it up. They have made it coin operated. They come from that background. Unless you hire somebody who has taken things 0 to 1, how are they going to figure out a new 0 to 1 product or a new 0 to 1 channel or a new 0 to 1 market? So here what you need to do as a founder, as a CEO, is go back to being that founder and create a small team while you have your VPs scaling this product and putting more fuel on fire. Let's say your GTM is community. Go all in on community. Let's say your GTM is sales. Go all in on sales. Let's say your product is that one feature. Go all in. Make it better for that customer base. And you then bring on 1 to 0 to 1 minded people and skunkworks figure out, should I go to Europe? Or should I have a whole new product set? Or should I try a whole new marketing channel? So that was my job actually at Boast. After I did a bunch of 0 to 1 stuff and people took it over, it was like, okay, we need to launch in Toronto. I did that. We need to launch in Montreal. We need to launch in San Francisco. I did that. We need to launch a new product. We need to launch a new channel. I was the first SDR. Before we had sales development, we were only selling in person, right? And then I said, you know what? I think we should sell on the phone. It's highly inefficient to sell in person. Now we have a brand, we have a community, people know us. Our head of sales is like, how are we going to do that? I've never sold over the phone. So I signed up for MixMax, which is an outbound sales emailing tool. And I scraped emails leveraging somebody from, it was Amazon Mechanical Turk, right? And today there are so many tools, but back then, used Mechanical Turk. People were creating lists. I'd wake up in the morning, the list is built, write the messaging, put it in MixMax. And I think within like 6-8 months, I signed the equivalent of one salesperson entirely by doing email and phone sales, where the whole company was doing in person. Then I'm like, okay, you know what? The same framework. Do it yourself, then hire 2 people that you can train, then hand it over. So I hired 2 SDRs, trained them, they got good, then gave it to our VP sales and marketing, or VP sales rather. Same thing with community. I built the community, took it to a point of scale, did the first few events. So that is really, really important. And that's how you keep your company efficient. You figure out new things. And then once that's figured out, you hand it over to the people who can scale it. And you also keep it interesting for yourself because otherwise it becomes very boring.
True. But speaking about product channel fit, you started Traction community, but before that, what kind of go-to-market strategies you tried before you decided let's start a community?
You know, we fell into the community, man, because that community came from going to the events to meet startup people, right? And then we made friends with them. And then as we made friends with them, we realized they're not getting media coverage, and all the events are high-level CEO platitudes. All the events they go to are like inspirational talks. Bro, if you're trying to make ends meet, there's only so much David Goggins and so much Elon Musk you're going to listen
Brian
to.
Tracy.
Yeah, you need to know, how do I get my first customers? How do I hire my first employees on low to no pay? How do I get my first angel investment? Nobody was talking about that back then. So we said, we wrote that column in the newspaper, Startup of the Week. And then every week we would host a meetup in our co-working space. And we'd put a very specific tactical topic, like how to do SEO for a startup, how to get your first 5 customers, how to do cold emailing, how to get your first angel investment. And we'd bring people who are immediately relevant, not like people who are like 50, 100 million in revenue, but somebody, if somebody is at 0 to 1, you can bring somebody who's 1 to 10, immediately relevant. So you resonate with them. Like right now, if I keep bringing Elon Musk and people like that, you'll be in awe of them, but they won't be able to tell you how to solve your immediate problems. So you need somebody who's like relatable. So that's what we did. The one thing though is we never stopped. For 2.5, 3 years, wrote that Startup of the Week column for free, and we did those weekly meetups. One day, I think within a year or so, we hosted a meetup and 200 people came to the co-working space. We had to now turn it into a makeshift conference center last minute. Brought in a projector from somewhere outside. All cheap, hacky, right? Like go to the audio rental place, bring up projectors, speakers, hijack the aisles of the co-working space and change the direction so it looks like people can sit. Then the co-working space is like, bro, now you're running conferences. You can't do this here anymore, such big meetups. That evolved into Traction Conference. And today we've had like CEOs of Uber and Atlassian and Shopify and all these big C-suite have come to our events and spoken there.
How did you monetize your conference? Again, conferences, you hope to make money or your third or fourth conference because it's really hard to make money in the first.
So for us, the thing was we apply the same lean principles of building Boast to the conference. Boast, we got paying customers before we build the product. And V1 of the product was Zapier with Zoho Creator. And then V2 of the product was, actually V1 of the paper was us doing it manually, Wizard of Oz, right? You did this Wizard of Oz framework for MVP. That was Wizard of Oz MVP. And then V2 was Zoho Creator and Zapier, no code, low code. And then the V3 is your own platform when you're at point of scale. The same thing with the conference. We're like, we knew that people would attend, right? Because we had this community building and now they've told us that you can't do meetups at the co-working space. I built a list of all the founders I admired. Same thing, cold email every single one of them.
The same cold email that you used when you applied universities when you were young. The same theme.
Cold email is, see, I tell you, a lot of people look for new hacks.
Yeah.
There's only... The path to success is doing the same 1 or 2 things over and over again. There's no silver bullet. Cold email worked for me in university, like applications. It worked for me in getting customers even before Boast when I worked at startups. It helped with validation. And so I'm like, okay, we got to do a conference. I can go and try new things. But me relying on asking people I know to recommend speakers is never going to work because I'm relying on their timeline. You can only bet on yourself, not on somebody else, right? At that early stages, you need to operate with high urgency. So I built a list of 300-400 speakers and I cold emailed all of them. And I had the follow-up sequence, right?
You automated the whole thing as well.
The whole thing automated, like Mixmax.
Okay.
I've used, and confidentially, or rather full disclosure, I'm now an angel investor also in Mixmax.
That's full circle.
Yeah, full circle. But before I wasn't. I was using it, and then I ended up becoming an angel investor in the last couple of years in their last round. But nonetheless, I used it so much, right? And so cold email them, and what happens is people stop when they don't get a response or when get some rejection. Got a lot of rejection. But a few people said, oh, we might be interested. Now, like I think the 15 people out of 500 that said we might be interested, I took all their names and reached up to the 485 people and be like, these people are interested, right? As a follow-up. And one speaker confirmed, I think Hootsuite, you know Hootsuite?
Of course.
Ryan Holmes confirmed.
Oh, wow.
Because he must, actually no, Ryan Holmes didn't confirm. Marketo. You know, remember Marketo, the first marketing automation platform?
What year was that?
Marketo wow, this was 2015. It was huge.
Okay.
It was one of the early unicorns.
Yeah.
So Marketo's CEO must have seen, like, I'm like, these people are interested. I think what he thought was those people confirmed maybe.
Such a
and
great
he
hack.
confirmed.
Yeah.
So when he confirmed, then I reached out and said, Phil is a big angel investor. You know, Marketo was a early B2B unicorns. When I said he confirmed, and reached out to everyone. Ryan Holmes from Hootsuite confirmed. Jeff Lawson from Twilio confirmed. These are all now
Big names.
Big names, right? Groupon confirmed. Postmates, which got acquired by Uber, they confirmed. Dropbox, all these big names.
That's your first conference.
That's the first bro. Like they all like it's like a domino effect. All these and many of them at the time they weren't unicorns like Postmates, like Twilio. They all eventually within a year or two became unicorns. 99 Designs, all these big names. I'm thinking Dropbox. I'm thinking Gainsight. All the big names. And then what I did was I used Squarespace and Eventbrite. And on the weekend, I built a site with all their photos, and I sent an email blast to the list with early bird tickets.
Okay.
Literally, I just said, hey, super early bird tickets are on sale. We're announcing this new conference, and the prices go up like in 24 hours. We sold $50,000 in tickets.
Oh, wow.
And now I'm like telling my co-founders, I think we need to book a venue. We sold $50,000 in tickets. And they're like, what the hell, man? Like, we didn't expect it, right? Because the biggest event we had seen was 200 people who came to the co-working space suddenly.
But did you have money aside for your first conference?
No, we had nothing, man. We had nothing. Like literally 50,000 came in sales from Eventbrite. And I still remember Eventbrite saw for a new account a sudden spike in sales and they seized our account.
Oh.
Because they do that, right? Like at the time, payments, and we were using PayPal as a payment gateway. They seized the account. Do that. So they would not give access to the funds. So we had to call them and beg them, and then they released the funds, right? But I'm like, okay, you know, sometimes that quick success can also be detrimental. But we had to book a venue. Now we promoted the event on a specific date without having any venue or anything booked. So now we had to find venues for that date. All the hotels were booked and too expensive. My buddy and co-founder in the Traction community, Ray, he runs an incubator called Launch Academy. His family used to host Bollywood concerts in Canada. So he knew a lot of like nightclubs and stuff. He found this EDM, you know, electronic dance music hall. And he's like, I can get this on rent. And we go in there. I'm like, what the hell, bro?
Such a completely different industry.
It's completely different. But like we needed the venue. He's like, I love this. We can retrofit it. And you have to use their screen. You cannot bring an outside AV company. And AV from outside costs a lot. So they had this screen. You know how the EDM halls have these giant pixelated screens. So we put presentations on there. They had a massive disco ball. There was a stripper pole that we needed to hide. And the floor is only is set up for dancing, a standing room only.
I love this.
So we set up like 200 chairs maximum, and freaking 500-600 people. I think over 500 people showed up.
That's insane.
And in the back they had the lounge area, you know, like lounges, like with lounge chairs. So we extended the seating.
Yes.
One of his cousins was a wedding caterer, so they catered the food. So it done very hacky. We made money from the first conference. Man, it was insane.
You made money from the first conference?
That conference made money.
This never happened.
This happened because me and Ray planned it.
Oh, really?
And then we reached out to the community to say, we have all these speakers coming. Would you be interested in volunteering? So we did this all ourselves. Like we booked that EDM hall. We had our own staff retrofitted. We used a wedding caterer who's a family member, runs a restaurant, catering business to cater. So it's done very cheap. And the tickets we're selling were $300 to $500. So we made money. It was profitable. I made very little money, but we did not lose money, much like Boast, right? So the same bootstrapper genes. Now the thing is, we end up signing up more speakers than it could fit in the days of the conference. I'm like, this is a problem because so many people, like it's like a domino effect. All these big names, everyone wanted to come. Vancouver, we hosted this one in Vancouver, beautiful city on the water. Now we're like, we had to come up with a new idea. How do we fit this content within the day? So we reached out to everyone and be like, you know, all talks at all events are long, boring. People get tuned out 30 minutes. This time, this was not an age of TikTok or anything. So we're like, we'll make it rapid fire talks, 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So you have to present your learnings on the topic in terms of like 10 ways, 5 ways, like, just your top learnings. And we're like, but if people don't stick to their time, it's going to be a problem. So we bought this, we rented this smoke machine and we put it backstage, the water-based smoke machine. I still remember the ice-based one was more expensive, or the electric one was more expensive. So we rented the water-based and we put it there. And so what happened was, when a speaker ran out of time at like 15 minutes or just under, we'd release the smoke machine and it'd go poof, and the speaker would get startled, and everyone in the audience would start clapping. Now we're at the end of the conference.
Okay.
I had reached out to a lot of media people to do interviews, and through that I made a lot of media friends, like TechCrunch, Frederic Lardinois. He was the moderator for the last session.
Yes.
On stage. He goes on stage, and I think if you see the Traction 2015 video, you'll hear him say, "Why are they releasing the smoke? We just went on stage." The stage started smoking. And when we go backstage, the smoke machine ran out of water and the drapes had caught on fire.
No way.
And then we had to, like, Alex, my co-founder, and Ray, they were throwing water on there. It was...
Can everybody smell the fire?
Luckily averted in time, and the talks finished and everything, and it was a great success.
Oh, wow.
But nonetheless, man, you got to be willing to take risks.
Okay.
And the only way to bootstrap, if you have infinite money, you can do anything. You can produce a movie like Steven Spielberg, right? You can make an Avatar or whatever you want. But when you have no money, because you're a new founder, you have to hustle. And nobody's going to give you this money. You have to create value and ask for money. And so if you're doing a conference, try to find the best speakers whose names will sell, put it on a website, and sell tickets for it.
Oh, God, that's great advice.
Right? If you have a product that delivers value, try to convince 4 or 5 people to pay you to try it out. That's been the philosophy of my life. Now, the book we released, right? Like the book on community-led growth from grassroots to greatness. In order to sell it, I put pre-sale. And of course, now we've built a big enough newsletter with 100,000+ subscribers. But I'm like, I need to be on every freaking podcast I can. Same thing, built a list of 500 podcasters through friends and people I knew, and reached out to all of them using Mixmax, cold email. And email one was, basically my subject line is funny. It said your name, so the podcaster's name, collab with our 120 subscriber community. Right?
Who's going to say no to that?
So podcast collab. So that the subject line is important because it forces you to open the email. Mm-hmm. Dude, I've sent emails which has gotten 100% open rates, which is very hard.
Oh, amazing.
It'll be like, your name, see you this Thursday. Then you open and it's an invite for an event on Thursday. At least you optimize for the open rate, right? If you don't have a good subject line, your chances of being read are low. So optimize for the subject line, then have a very concise email because everyone's on their phone. So write it in 1-2 sentences so they don't have to scroll. If somebody can get the gist of your email without scrolling, you're gold. So it was like, hey, I run a newsletter and podcast of 120,000 subscribers. We have a book coming out. This is my background. Bootstrap a company, raised over 100 million, and built this community, and now have a book coming out. Would love to be on your podcast, and if you feature me, I'll promote it to our community as well. And I started getting responses. Schedule them now. It's like, I put the pre-sale of the book a month before the book launch. So I think the pre-sale was August to September last year. And so from June, I started taking these interviews. So in 8 weeks or 9 weeks, I did something like 80 podcasts. And you can go and verify it because it's on Listen Notes. Go to listennotes.com and type my name, Lloyed Lobo, and you'll see all the podcasts I've been on. I truly believe this now. It's been my philosophy. If you want to get good at something, put yourself in an environment that forces you to do that something over and over again in a short amount of time. High volume in a condensed time frame. When you reduce the time frame to do something and you do it repeatedly, you learn very fast. So my messaging got very fluid. I was constantly answering similar questions. I made it easy for the podcasters because I put together a speaker document with my background, with key questions on a variety of topics, and photos, and made their life easy, basically, right, for giving me the interview. So they were very prepared. I was prepared. And what I did was the sort of smaller podcasts were easier to schedule. They happened in the beginning, and then
Yeah.
that social proof got me the next one and the next one and the next one. It's all about leveling up from the current social proof you have to the next one and the next one. And I was able to get 80 podcasts, and I asked them all to release it during the month of my pre-sale, and I was everywhere, all over LinkedIn. And then we kept hitting bestseller list after list after list, and I got the social proof of some of these people.
True.
And then after the week of launch, my publisher calls me and said, "Hey man, it's made the Wall Street Journal bestseller list." And
That's
I'm
amazing
like,
news.
"That's great news." And then I decided to take a break and do nothing.
But so the few things I was not with you when you started Boast.AI or Traction, but I looked back 9 weeks, 80 podcasts. That's insane. And you are a great communicator. I've been here for like an hour and a half, and I feel so close for you as well. You're very concise and very economical with your words. Is communication and work ethic something that you thought of, that you cultivated, or you're just born with it?
I don't think you're born with anything other than the brain, other than your brains and your hands, legs, whatever you get, you get. I think 90% of what you are is your environment, is your community, is your nurture. I've just been fortunate to be around the right people at the right time, parents, values, upbringing. And I have now realized over time that whenever I'm in status quo or whenever life gets too comfortable, I just change my environment. I am a big believer. You know, they say this, a lot of movie stars say this. And it's not like I took a lesson from them, but they say sometimes to prepare for the role, they go and be that person. And for me, it's like I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I'm like, what's the fastest way for me to learn in a condensed
Method
environment?
acting for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, method acting for entrepreneurship is go and work for founders. Who else? I can read about entrepreneurship. I can watch like everything from like Y Combinator, but how is that going to help me learn? I have to do it. If you want to be a tennis player, you got to go and play tennis. You can read all about tennis and watch every video and masterclass, but you're not going to. So you got to do reps in a short amount of time. And so work for founders, data startup. Same thing. Like you can read about writing a book and take every course, but the only way to do that is to actually write it, right, and promote it. And the same thing, like I took a break for 2 years after I left the day to day of the business. Fortunately, this community that I built, I tell you, has given me everything, from early customers to some of my best friends, and the private equity firm that purchased half of Boast and made liquidated us somewhat. Also came to the community. We hosted a community event. They reached out saying, "Who hosts this event?" They asked me if I would join their venture partner network and send them deal flow. And I said, "Listen, man, we got a business to run." I'm like, "What business?" Explained the business. They loved it. We didn't want to raise money because we were bootstrapped. Now, here's the benefit of bootstrapping. Because we're bootstrapped, we sold 52% of the company and became financially independent, me and my co-founder. But at the same time, me and my co-founder still own almost 40% of this company that is
Oh, wow.
scaling, and we transitioned to the board. So that's the value of bootstrapping.
And all happened within 8 weeks? That's insane as well.
That process happened during the pandemic in 2020. We hosted an event. They expressed interest, and we signed a term sheet for a 30-day turnaround, right? It's a 30-day. It ended up being 90 days, man, because the due diligence is very hard.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a bootstrap company, because you don't have all the tools. We're using Zoho, and they're used to seeing Salesforce. We're all hacky in Excel, right? So nonetheless, it worked out. But the community has given me everything. And then when I came into money, actually, I got depressed because I left the day-to-day of the business. I'm like, my whole identity was the company. And I think within a week or two of coming into that money, I got COVID and almost died. And I was in the hospital. My wife, being a doctor at that hospital, couldn't see me. There was a 24/7 Zoom setup. And honestly, life, money, a lot of things lost meaning for me because all your life you chase money thinking it's going to bring you happiness. Like the definition of success is money. And then when you come into it, you realize that I sacrificed my health and my family and everything. And if you're going to lose your life, then what good is it? So, en route to that, I got very overweight. I used to drink, smoke a lot. Killed
I
my
have a
immune system.
picture before VC, after VC. Can we use it for the
Yeah, yeah,
podcast?
you can use it. You can use it before VC, after VC.
Yeah.
And so, again, when things got very uncomfortable, I changed my environment because I knew being in Silicon Valley, everyone was like, when are you going to start the next thing? And when's the next thing? And the next thing? And you're too young. And so we moved to Dubai. We're like, I don't know anyone in Dubai. I have a couple of cousins who are very close to me, but moved to Dubai, changed the environment. Here, there's a good balance of work and life. People work to live here. In the US, people live to work. Your
Yeah.
identity is built around your work.
But you were in Kuwait, you flew away from here, you went to Canada, you went to the States, you sold your own company, you can be anywhere in the world. Why you chose Dubai?
Honestly, a couple of things, and it's very interesting. We could have gone anywhere. We could have gone to Bali. We could
Yes.
have gone anywhere. We had spent a month here. I really like the culture here. Maybe it's the grew up in Kuwait vibe
okay.
kind of thing. Love the food here. People are very hospitable. It's a very fit city also. Like everyone is like, actively working out and fit. My closest cousins are here, like my first cousin who designed the cover of this book, and my son's godfather, and my closest person, the closest person to me other than my wife, after my wife, he's here. And so it just made sense. We came here and like life was good. You're like, okay, if you're gonna go to a new place and you have a couple family members and some friends who we grew up in Kuwait, then this is a good place to be because Dubai is like Miami meets Mumbai, right? You're in the
Never heard this one
Palm.
before.
You're in the Palm or you're Jumeirah Beach Road.
Yeah.
It's Miami, and you go to Karama, Bar Dubai. It's like Mumbai, right? So you have a good multiculturalism. It's good exposure for my kids. It's also very safe, and that was a big criteria. If you're gonna leave and you want to go somewhere where it is so safe that you don't have to worry. When you go to like certain countries and there's a language barrier and there's an income barrier,
Yeah.
then safety becomes a concern. Like it gives you sort of a little bit of hesitation or discomfort. Dubai, everybody speaks English. Although they say Arabic's the first language, I think English is the first. Everyone speaks English. After English, they speak Urdu or Hindi and
Then
Arabic.
Russian,
Yeah.
maybe Arabic.
Yeah, and Arabic, right? So I can
Yes.
speak Hindi quite well. My parents made sure I learned the language that they grew up with, and Arabic I can get by very slightly. But nonetheless, everyone speaks English here, so it's easy. So it wasn't a cultural shock for my kids. So a couple of reasons, like Dubai was great, and it's literally transformed me. I mean, you can show the before photo of
Absolutely,
how
I
I
will.
was overweight, and I had a very entrepreneurial focus towards my health, and I made everything about like wake up, go to the gym, sit in the sauna, walk 60 to 90 minutes every day, play a sport. I said if I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna walk away with something that becomes second nature, and in July, we're going to move back to the US. Parents are there, family is there, cousins are there. So I think that becomes really important as your kids grow. It's more about like after a certain age, it's not the money, right? After a certain point, you optimize for the relationships. And for me, my parents, my in-laws are all there, and that proximity as they age is something that it'll never come back, and so I want to optimize for that.
But speaking of relationship, something I find very interesting in the book, which I don't find in a lot of business book, which I don't think this is a business book. You mentioned your wife several times, over 5, 6 times. What's her impact on your life having high risk, high stress environment?
I always say I'm lucky, man. And everyone works hard, and I'm lucky because I had very supportive parents growing up, and supportive family members. And as I went in the journey of entrepreneurship, my wife has been very supportive.
She's successful by his own right. She's a doctor as well.
Yeah, my wife got into medical school without entrance exams. She's a professor
Yeah.
and a director of ER ultrasound at Stanford. And she was bringing the stable income. You know how hard it would be if she didn't have a stable job and I was trying to do business? So, a lot of people say, privilege. I had privilege, but maybe not from a race or financial backing privilege, But I had privilege in my own right in that my wife had a very stable income being a doctor, and doctors get paid very well in the US, right? So she was paying the bills, but she supported me. One failure, two failures, so two startup failures. Then we did an events company where the co-founder ran away with all the profits and we had to sue him, and we walked away with very little money. She believed and she supported and she pushed me. She was in New Jersey. We from Canada moved to New Jersey. Her parents are there. I begged her to move to Silicon Valley because I truly believe in that method acting.
Yeah.
You want to be in startups, go to Silicon Valley. You want to work in movies, go to Hollywood. I truly, truly believe in environment, and nobody can change my mind on the impact of environment. So I'm like, listen, being in New Jersey, I'm never going to be able to build a startup. And although in New Jersey and in that tri-state area, I worked for two startups, it was not the same, right? It's just the learnings weren't there, the successes weren't there. And against her will, she didn't want to move because of her family being on the East Coast. She agreed to move to California, and we spent the last 14 years there and build the community and the relationships, and it helped me personally, and it helped our business and my learnings as a founder. So she's been very supportive. When my health deteriorated and I left the day-to-day of the business, I suggested Dubai, and she agreed to come here. So I think, having a supportive partner is so important. Wouldn't be here without that ever, right? Because she has her own career. To sacrifice your desires for somebody else is how you win together. If you want to, there's this saying, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And this is, life and business is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so you got to find the partner and the community that'll take you far.
Oh God, that was so beautiful. Still, one last question before you end. But again, I'm so happy that you find your partner, because especially in our sphere, there's a lot of either people are still single, trying to work things out, or no, once I sell my business, then I get my married. But you have it all figured out. That's amazing.
It's not that I was lucky again, right? We met when we were teenagers.
Oh God.
And it's not like her parents were always fond of me because, startups wasn't a thing. It looked like I'm jumping from one company to the other that's failing. And this one is in medical school, going to be a doctor. So she had to fight her parents to be with me.
And Indian parents are very...
Yeah, very strict. And she had to fight a lot of societal norms to be with me. And so she was very, very supportive. And I think that is key. See, another thing is I take risks when it comes to business because I know that drives growth. But when it comes to personal life, I'm very afraid to take risks. But she always supported me. She's like, listen, when it's so funny. I don't want to have kids. And she's like, what are we going to do? Wait for you to build a company and have lots of money to have kids? No. Make the decision now. Let's have kids. We had 3 kids, right? We have 3 kids. And the first kid we had within, I think, a year and a half of starting the company. And the company wasn't even making enough money for us to make a decent living.
That's
and
scary.
She was in residency. She was just finished fellowship. And so she wasn't making enough money. But she's like, we'll learn.
Oh, wow.
We'll learn to adapt. She's like, pain is the precondition for growth. Whenever you're out of your comfort zone, you push yourself and you grow. So she's like, now we have another responsibility, so we'll work harder. Then she made us buy a house. She's like, I'm like, listen, let's just rent. She's like, what? We'll pay rent forever. Like, if we buy a house and now we have that mortgage payment, it'll force us to work harder to meet that. And honestly, it was the best investment because honestly, if everything goes to crap, in 2013, we bought a house in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, and that's appreciated significantly. So she's always pushed me to make decisions outside my comfort zone. A lot of partners, what they do is they say, no, don't do it. They discourage you. She's always like, no, take the risk. Take the risk, take the risk, take the risk. We're still young. If everything goes south, we'll make it up. We have our hands and legs. We're smart. And so that is very important.
And why it was important that she will be the first one to unbox your book? I saw this video somewhere on LinkedIn.
Yeah, because, I think I think it's like, the book, the first signed copy, I think, of the book, which was Wall Street Journal bestseller, went to my mom. And the unboxing was done by her. It's the two most important people in my life. And I think
Oh,
that's the, a lot of, I think in general, the joy you get from seeing other people happy creates more happiness for you than the joy you get from doing things for yourself. And there's no other way to honor the most important people in your life by actually giving them the importance that they deserve, right? So that's the thing. And if you look at it, that is the purpose of community in general. And just to, as we close out here, I want to say something which is very interesting. I talked about many things, but if you look at every small obscure idea that eventually went on to become an enduring global phenomena, from Christianity and Christ to CrossFit, they went through the exact same four stages. People listen to you or buy your product, you have an audience. When you bring that audience together to interact with one another on a cadence, it starts becoming a community. When the community comes together to create impact towards a purpose that's greater than your product or profit, that's beyond your product or profit, it becomes a movement. And when that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals, over time it becomes a cult or a religion. And look at every religion. The messenger was spreading the word and they had an audience. Then the audience started coming together to discuss the word. Then that and became a community. Then that community started coming together to create impact and heal and help people. It became a movement. And then they started having regular rituals and it became a cult or religion. Harley Davidson, Nike, they all have their rituals. Harley Davidson, the weekend warriors, right? The bikers. In the 80s, Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt. We talk a lot about technology today. But you see, the innovation in the 2000 was .com. We don't say .com company anymore. Then we started saying mobile company. We don't say mobile company, social company, cloud company. The same way we will not say AI company. Yesterday's innovation will always become tomorrow's commodity. But if you build a community, you won't become a commodity because real sustainability is based on human to human interaction. Even you look at social media right now, brand interactions are going down, people interactions are going up. Why do you think all these CEOs are starting to have personal profiles and post their content? Because they recognize that. So why look back at 2000? Look back at the 80s. The innovation then was electronics. When the Japanese manufacturers started innovating, Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt with the Japanese bikes. The leadership came out and said, we're going to make community a part of our ethos very deliberately. Employees went out and started rider clubs. Riders became employees became riders. They started getting together frequently around the joys of riding and the camaraderie of riding. Then they started riding for causes, raising money for autism, breast cancer. Today, if you see a dog wearing a leather jacket, you know it's a Harley Davidson fan. That is the power of community.
and that's a sneak peek from your book. It's called The Framework Camper, if I'm not mistaken.
So Camper, the framework behind Camper is, as I looked at all these sustainable brands and communities and relationships, religions, I found 6 common pieces to building sustainable communities, cultures, relationships. And I call it Camper, and it's cheesy, but if you have Camper proactively, you'll have happy campers. C stands for connection. Everyone wants to feel connected. Otherwise, you feel like you're not valued, right? A stands for autonomy. You don't want to work anywhere where somebody's on your shoulder and micromanaging you. You want goals and you want to be left alone. Do you want somebody to keep coming to you and saying, oh, where is that? Where is that? Where is it? Where is it? Have you done it? Are we there yet? So A stands for autonomy. M stands for mastery. Nobody wants to be stuck doing the same thing. They want to get better and better and better. P stands for purpose, a purpose that's beyond just making money, a greater purpose. What is the greater good? E stands for energy. You might be in a conference and you enjoy the talks, but then a speaker comes and just reading from slides and you get bored and everyone's on their phone because the energy has left the room. So constantly infuse energy. You look at the biggest movements, the biggest religions, they have great energy. And the last one, is recognition. When you proactively recognize people for anything small or big, they keep coming back for more. Otherwise, people feel like robots, right? And so, connection, autonomy, mastery, purpose, energy, recognition. Not only in business, but institute that in your personal life with your partner, with your friends. Like, look at it with relationships. Couples fall out of love, right? Once, not like the things get stale. Kids come, work gets busy. But if you find a way to deliberately connect with each other, maybe work out together every day, you have autonomy, meaning, okay, I'm responsible for these tasks, you're responsible for these tasks. And I don't keep harassing you. Are you done yet? Are you done yet? We trust each other where we give each other autonomy. We help each other get better and better, mastery. There's a great sense of purpose is love, right? Sustainable, everlasting love and family. There's energy. Not like, I'm on the phone when we're talking. Like, do things that drive energy in the relationship. And the last one is appreciation, like recognition. Say thank you. Like, oh, you look nice today. Or, the food was great. Or thank you for taking care of that for me. Right? Or, you gave up X so I could do Y. Thank you. Recognize people. And that takes your community, your relationships very far, Camper.
So I want to be respectful of your time. This is one last question. So we've been talking a lot about technology, community, mental health. I went to your Instagram and it's full of fitness. For over 40. First of all, you look 10 years younger than that. That's freaking amazing. That's Indian genes. But why fitness on Instagram?
You know what? It's not. I don't know if it's Indian genes or what it is. I think it is. If you see me at 30,
yeah,
and I'll share some pictures after.
Please.
I look like I was 50 when my first kid was born. I was overweight and out of shape. It was stress. I moved to Dubai to focus on health, and after I was able to make a transformation, my wife now manages 3 kids, 3 pregnancies, and I said, I'll help you with your fitness. So I said, I'll document your journey. I took a break from LinkedIn. It was all business. Again, back to what I said, right?
Yeah.
Method acting. So I started talking about fitness and documenting our fitness journey in public, literally for that, for accountability and to live that life. To be the person you are, to be the person you want to be, you have to live and play the part all the way through, right? And so documenting it, I truly, truly believe in documenting things, building in public, because it keeps you accountable and keeps you in check, right? Same thing with business. You document things that you do, maybe not in public, but you document things so you know what you did and what goal you're driving towards. If you don't document, if you don't measure a metric, even in product management, business, personal life, health, everything, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. Simple. And so this was a way of keeping us accountable. And it's interesting because as I started posting, people started messaging. It's like, oh, we're looking for day 4 video, day 5 video, right? And it also forced both of us to show up. So there are days where we didn't want to work out, but we'd show up because we're accountable.
Yeah.
And that was really it. And honestly, I think I'm probably in the best shape I've been in my whole life because of that. One, having a partner that I can work out with, and 2, doing it in a sustainable way and documenting it. Or rather, documenting it helped us make it a habit, and now it's become sustainable.
Man, that's a great place to end the pod on. So I just can't recommend this enough. From grassroots to greatness, 13 secrets. You have a step-by-step process, how to create a community, how to maintain a community, and how to monetize a community. Lobo, do you have any place that we can send our community to?
Definitely. You can go to LloydLobo.com and you can get the book, or from grassroots to greatness.com. I stopped posting on LinkedIn because it took a little bit of a break, but I have some old content on there, and I'll be live again in September on LinkedIn. And then I have my podcast Traction on Spotify, and it's mostly talking to founders and business owners. That's it. Yeah.
Man, great to have you aboard, man.